What up, people? Pussy Wild Black here, and before I go and start my day, today is my birthday today, and I'm actually gonna do two vlogs, but the birthday one might be later, because it's gonna be a little bit different than when I usually do the reflection ones on Facebook and stuff, or the reflection post on Facebook. But I wanted to talk about as the Bulls lose again, disappointingly, to Philly. I'm not even going to talk about that because that was just not defending and Jimmy Butler scoring a bunch of points and everybody else watching him do it. And Philly just being a more, I'm not even going to say better, just more talented basketball team than what the Bulls actually are. But Jerry Krause died Tuesday. And as a Bulls fan who watched 6 championships, who watched the Baby Bulls, who watched the beloved core, even though that wasn't Jerry's thing, and who's watching what's going on now, which is I want to be a motion offense, but I don't want to give the coach, the players that he needs to run the actual offense. Jerry Krause knew what he was doing. As much as he was the bad guy as far as Jordan and Phil Jackson and Scottie Pippen to a point, and then Jerry brought him back. And that was also a Reinsdorf move and a Krause move. Jerry knew what he was doing. As a fan, there were some missteps about his because I really wasn't. I was watching the Bulls, but see, I really wasn't into the depths of like news, and I wasn't really a sports talk radio head until I was like 17, and that was unfortunately during the Bulls' rebuilding years. And I actually have some thoughts about the rebuilding years because there was a couple of moves that I didn't like, but in hindsight, if it would have worked, it probably would have been. It was quicker than the Bulls rebuilding would have been better. Would have been different. Everybody looks at the Scottie Pippen, the moving of Olden Polynice to get the draft rights to Scottie Pippen. Jerry was always that was his guy, that was his pick. Pippen was really raw coming out of Central Arkansas. People really didn't know who he was, and he really didn't have the skill. He had the skill set, but he really didn't have the polish coming out of college. Jerry Krause being a scout, he saw something, and he got him, and he's a Hall of Famer, 50 greatest player. But Jerry actually got him in here, and actually, they developed him, and it was the perfect piece next to Jordan to actually build that dynasty. The move for now, I wasn't around for the well, I was around, but I wasn't conscious of the Charles Oakley for Bill Cartwright move. But that solidified the first three-peat. The one that I was conscious of and the moves that I started to be conscious of was during the second three-peat. And the move to get Kerr in there, the move to get Rodman, the Kukoc move, which at the time everybody was like, Tony Kukoc, we don't really know who this dude is. Tony was, because back then you really couldn't see tape of guys, so Jerry actually went overseas to look at guys, and there was because I was listening to the score, and there were stories of Dirk Nowitzki being in his office at 18 or at 15, and because over there you can be you can be a pro at 15. So there were interviews of Dirk Nowitzki before Don Nelson found him, and Tony Kukoc, and Tony Kukoc ended up being a integral part of the second three-peat, and Luke Longley, and the second three-peat was where I really started to notice what I really started to notice like what Jerry was trying to do, and you know, Bison Dele, that was a guy that was found. And you had some workmen, not best players in the world, but you had some workman guys that actually, contributed to some teams. And I was really conscious of after the three-peat and this is when I started getting into sports radio at about 17 and 16, 17, and the mis- misstep of the rebuilding years. And the first misstep was breaking up that team in the first place. And in addition to that was when he said organizations win championships, not players. And that was a misstep that did before his passing. He actually mentioned that was something that he regretted. The other big regret before he passed was hiring Tim Floyd. Now, the Bulls as an organization, they run that organization like a mom and pop shop, and you got to know everybody, and there's an Iowa State connection there because of Krause and Reinsdorf, to be honest, and that's still happening. Gar Foreman, Iowa State guy, Fred Hoiberg, Iowa State guy. So, but there was a couple missteps. Not the initial when Elton Brand got drafted, breaking up the team. You don't break up a team that just won a championship. It was the thing, because everybody's like, we don't want to be like Boston. We don't want to be like because Boston stayed together way too long with Bird and McHale, and they stayed way too long in the 90s to where they really couldn't. There was a time where they were bad and they couldn't really get out of being bad. They stayed mediocre way too long. Jerry was trying to avoid that. He didn't want to be like Boston. So he was trying to avoid that. So in not really in Phil didn't want to play that. Phil didn't want to coach. Jordan didn't want to, play if Phil wasn't going to be there. Pippen was under Pippen, I think, was under contract. They didn't have to trade him to Houston, but they broke that team up because Phil didn't want to coach anymore. There was issues there. I say you try to convince it for one more run and see what happens. I'm kind of like what Jordan said, where it's like we keep going until we lose, but that didn't happen. The idea, and this was kind of tanking before it became popular. When he broke the team up, they signed Brent Berry. Tony Kukoc was the guy, and it was him and Brent Berry for like a year. And basically it was, we're going to play bad. We're going to play bad. We're going to get the number one pick. And then we have all this cap space. And that was the summer, I think, and it was the summer of 99. We're gonna play Tony Kukoc. We're gonna play Brent Berry, and we're gonna get all these young guys, and we're gonna see what happens. And this is gonna be the summer. I think Tracy McGrady was coming out for free agency. Tracy McGrady was gonna be a free agent. Tim Duncan was gonna be a free agent. Grant Hill was gonna be a free agent. So that was the big three of free agency, and they were gonna get two guys. They had enough cap space that they were gonna get two guys. They drafted, I think that was the year they drafted Ron Artest, Jamal Crawford, Ron Artest, Jamal Crawford, Michael Ruffin, and somebody. It was 4 picks. Somebody else. I think that was the Corey Brewer draft too, or I'm not sure, but I know they drafted Ron Artest and Michael Ruffin, and I remember that draft because when they drafted Michael Ruffin, and it was the same guy as Elton Brand. They had the same intangibles, and everybody was like, "What?" And the thing that struck me with, um, let me see, I think that was the Elton Brand draft. I'm not sure. I think 2000 was the. I think I think that was the Elton Brand draft. I'm not sure. I remember them drafting them. They were trying to play. They weren't trying to tank, but they were trying. They broke up the team and they were trying to play Tony Kukoc and Brent Barry, and that didn't work. And they ended up getting Ron Artest and Jamal Crawford, and I think it was Ron Artest and Elton Brand. I think, and the year Steve Francis came out was the year Steve Francis and Elton Brand came out. I really wanted them to get Steve Francis. They didn't end up getting Steve Francis because Jerry Krause has this thing about getting small guards, small lead guards, and you can actually play Steve to both positions. Elton Brand was safe. He was coming out of Duke. And I just didn't think Elton Brand, although I didn't think Elton Brand was going to be a franchise player. Elton Brand was nice, but he wasn't going to be a franchise. Stevie Francis was going to be the franchise. You didn't get Stevie Francis, you got Elton Brand, you got Ron Artest. And then Jamal Crawford was the next year. Jamal Crawford was the next year, I believe. But the summer that they got Elton Brand, yeah, because they got Elton Brand and Ron Artest, and they played the young guys, and Tony Kukoc was there, and then I remember now because Elton Brand was there when to greet Tracy McGrady, and they took him to Wrigley Field. There it is. They took him to Wrigley Field. So it was Elton Brand and Ron Artest. It was Elton Brand, Ron Artest. That was the first post Jordan pick. Those were the first post Jordan picks. And then it was Jamal Crawford came the next year. Okay. But the ideal was they were gonna have Elton Brand, they were gonna have Ron Artest, and then they were either gonna get Tracy McGrady, Grant Hill, or Tim Duncan. And I remember them going to get Tracy. I remember them going to pick up Tracy McGrady at the airport. This was like a big deal. And what happened was he ended up using Chicago as leverage to get to Orlando. And Tim Duncan didn't end up going anywhere. Grant Hill ended up signing with Orlando. Tracy McGrady ended up using Chicago as leverage, just like Eddie Jones did, to go to Orlando. And that Orlando thing didn't work because Grant Hill got hurt. So what happened with us was the plan was to do that, but he struck out in free agency, and we ended up getting Ron Mercer and Eddie Robinson, yeah. We ended up getting Eddie Robinson and Ron Mercer. That was a failure. We were just blah. And then the next year, I just got a text from one of my homies. Made me laugh. And then the next year, we ended up getting it was one of those, I think 2001, because Bulls were like bad and they weren't really progressing. So the next big thing that Jerry did, which I actually get what he was trying to do, it just didn't work because of the coaching. Trading Elton Brand to the Clippers for Eddie Curry and Tyson Chandler. I get what he was trying to do because you got to think about the Tyson Chandler. No, you got to think about the because that was in 01. So that was a draft of 01. So you got to think of this was shortly after the Twin Towers in San Antonio. So Eddie Curry, and I actually saw footage of Eddie Curry in high school, and the Shaq comparisons were real. It was just the conference that he was in. He was the tallest kid there. When he actually went up against somebody with height, which is why they didn't end up winning state that year. That because I was at SIU when I saw him play. When he got downstate, he got handled by some people. So, but the baby, from if you look at it highlight wise, the baby Shaq comparisons were real, and Tyson Chandler, with him being so athletic as he was, everybody thought he was going to be the next Kevin Garnett. So if you have those two guys as building blocks, I understand what he was trying to do. I also understand the Jason Williams pick, but when Jason Williams messed up, crashed that motorcycle, that basically went to blah. So it just seemed like it never really materialized after, the Jordan era, and he was never forgiven for breaking up that team, that championship team. You don't do that. But for what he was trying to do, if you look at it objectively, there was some hits and there was some misses and there were some theories that he was trying to figure out, and it didn't necessarily work. But if it would have worked, just think of if they didn't run the triangle. If they didn't run the triangle that first couple of years and they just let guys just run and recreate, which they tried to do after realizing that Tyson Chandler really wasn't a scorer and really wasn't a shooter. He was more of a defender. After realizing that wasn't happening, they actually, I think when Scott Skiles came in, everybody they were trying to run. The Bulls were trying to do a lot more running and a lot more basic offense. When they abandoned the triangle, then that was kind of with the beloved core, and that was after because I don't think Eddie was there. I think Tyson stayed for a little longer, but when they abandoned the triangle and they kind of let guys just run and do their thing, they actually played better. So just think, if I honestly think too that trading Elton Brand wasn't necessarily a mistake, but you could have drafted Tyson Chandler and kept Elton Brand, or you could have kept, I don't know, because Eddie Curry and Elton Brand kind of have the same game, but you could have kept Elton Brand. But I get what they were trying to do, because if it worked, you had like a twin tower dynamic, and both of them cats were 18 years old, and they were athletically enough to where if they would have abandoned the triangle and not tried to force the triangle on them cats, it would have worked. And with the Jason Williams thing, and Jamal Crawford was still there, I believe you had some building blocks. It just didn't materialize. But rest in peace, Jerry. You knew what you were doing, and you were kind of ahead of your time on a couple of things. That Scottie Pippen trade, and I learned this a few days ago when I was listening to the Scores podcast on the issue. That was ahead of its time to try to get and actually he did a really good thing by trying to get Pippen into a contender, and he got, that was cool, and that was actually ahead of the time as far as sign and train stuff. And he also was one of the first GMs, if not the first GM, to have a cap analyst. Their accountant was also the cap analyst, and he knew how to get people around him to explain what he didn't know. It was like he knew what he didn't know. So, salute, Jerry. Rest in peace, man. Considering the lack of risk taking that's going on now, You appreciate it, brother. Anyway, push the ball black out. Later.